Okay, I'm going to be talking about the hair and fiber evidence. This was work done by Doug Dietrich when he was in the FBI laboratory. Doug and I currently work together in the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., and he asked me to take his place today. I was not involved in the trial. I was doing DNA testing in the FBI laboratory at the time. And I've really not read any of the reports, but I've read a lot of books, or at least I've looked at parts of a lot of books that discuss the case, and I've read some of the items that Doug has put together. This is probably the best book. It's a book that was written by someone that had nothing to do with the case, but it's quite interesting. It looks at both sides of the case, so if you want to ever get a book about the Simpson case, this is a pretty good one. I'm going to be taking material from Jeffrey Toobin's book. He was mentioned yesterday. He's fairly knowledgeable. And it's interesting to look at what he wrote about the hair and fiber evidence in the case, because I was not aware of what they had. I didn't hear Doug testify when he testified at the trial. But I think he obviously had extremely important evidence. He was the last witness put on by the prosecution, which I think indicates what they considered the value of the trace evidence. Let's look at what he came up with. And this is from Toobin's book. There's a hair that matched Simpson from Goldman's shirt. There's a hair that matched Simpson. I'm sure these are head hairs that match Simpson on the cap that was found at the scene. There's a hair matching Nicole on the glove found at Simpson's estate. Cotton fibers all over the crime scene, and Simpson was wearing apparently a black jumpsuit prior to the homicides, and there were black or brown cotton, black, gray cotton fibers all over the crime scene. Fibers consistent with coming from Goldman's shirt were found on the gloves. And then he did some work with the Bronco carpet fibers, and that's what I'm going to talk about. He tried to do something extra, tried to get information about these Bronco carpet fibers. You know, how many cars are out there that have fibers like this? So he's addressing an issue which has been discussed at this particular conference on evidential value. You know, what does the evidence mean? Are there things you can do on occasion to enhance the evidential value? These are some quotes out of Toobin's book, and I'm going to read them really fast, but obviously that is tremendously strong evidence to anyone that is familiar with hair and fiber evidence done by someone that knows what they're doing, using the proper procedures and so forth. So basically Toobin is saying it's conclusive evidence of Simpson's guilt, and more importantly, a clear indication that Furman did not plant evidence. In other words, you can argue the blood was planted, which is pretty ridiculous, but how do you plant all this hair and fiber evidence? And the last comment by Toobin I think is also important. There was so much evidence that the hair and fiber evidence wasn't really even discussed at all, when in fact that was enough to convince most people that Simpson was guilty. Well, what do you do with evidence like that? These are quotes from my cases in the past where defense experts have criticized results. And all of these are true. All these statements are true. They're not true with respect to the particular polyester and nylon and rayon fibers in my case, but they're true in general. And I wrote a paper many years ago addressing evidential value, and I made a quote, or made a statement in the paper about the uncommon nature of fiber evidence, and if you can demonstrate it's uncommon, it's very unlikely that you're going to find a fiber that is uncommon in a particular location. And Doug tried to come up with information to show that these Bronco fibers are uncommon, and he presented a paper at a European Fiber Group conference many years ago, and I think the paper is going to be part of the proceedings of this conference. Well, what did he do? The last statement on the Toobin book dealt with the Bronco fibers. Doug contacts fiber producers. He finds out that it's a DuPont fiber, type 1405. He then contacts fiber producers that purchased that fiber from DuPont. Maslin Carpet Company manufactured a carpet that matched the carpet fibers in Simpson's vehicle. Turns out that Maslin supplied carpet to Ford in that particular color that went into 3 types of cars: the Bronco, as well as trucks and some vans. Doug also got carpet from other carpet suppliers and showed that, in fact, they were different from Simpson Bronco fibers. He went to RL Polk, which basically has car registration data from throughout the United States. He also knew from Ford what cars had this particular type of fiber in it. And it was determined there were about 1,900 cars, 1,971 cars or trucks that have this particular carpet. That's the number the defense likes. The argument is any one of these cars could have been the source of those fibers. But that's what they call in DNA the defense expert fallacy, or the defense attorney fallacy, because there's no other evidence linking any of these other cars other than the Simpson car, where there's a tremendous amount of evidence. In LA County, there's over 5 million cars and trucks, and if you divide one by the other, you get the relative frequency of vehicles that have that particular carpet, which I've shown there. It's approximately 1 in 3,000. I think Doug did this also in California. You could do it in the United States. So you've got a car that has a frequency of occurrence of 1 in 3,000, approximately. Well, what does this mean? Well, it's a relative frequency. It's also the probability of a coincidental match, the probability of going out and selecting a car or a truck at random in LA County and finding it to have carpet fibers like Simpson's. It's also what people in DNA call the random match probability. This is exactly how DNA evidence is handled. This is how you apply significance to DNA evidence. You talk about the random match probability. The other thing that's important is in 1993, there were 183 million cars and trucks in the United States. So even if you had 186,000 cars that had exactly the same carpet, the random match probability, or this probability of a coincidental match, would still be 1 in 1,000. I don't know if many people doing trace evidence have been hit with what the NRC1 and NRC2 said in DNA, but they basically say you need some number to support a DNA match. You need some estimate of the frequency with which such matches might occur by chance. You can't do that with hairs and fibers in most cases. But I think you can give a qualitative assessment of the probability. And in NRC2, they said the rarer the profile, the less likely that the two DNA samples came from different persons. Well, it applies to trace evidence also. I teach a class at George Washington University, and one of the things I emphasize to the students is the evidential value. I have them write a paper on assessing evidential value and supporting whatever evidential value. And so this is part of the things I argue. And I don't mean to say by talking about Doug's study that you need to do this. You can't do this very often. You can't come up with this actual number. But for the most part, if you're dealing with fibers that are not common, it's the basis of a strong association. Ken Wiggins, who is here at this conference, Mike Grieve, and many others have published a lot of papers that basically allow you to argue in court that if you're dealing with a fiber that's not common, the chance of a coincidental match is very, very small. Anyway, it's interesting at the trial because Doug wrote a great report, did a great study. It never gets into court because it wasn't turned over in discovery. When I was doing trace work in the FBI for 15 years, I had maybe 2 instances where where full discovery was requested. When I was doing DNA in 7 years, I had like 110 instances where full discovery was requested. It wasn't something that we really thought about. So it wasn't allowed into testimony. The results that he testified to, but not the study on the Bronco. Well, what about the civil case? We've got 2 more slides. The defense objected when they tried to get into the testimony at the civil case. And it's interesting, the judge sustains the objection. He does not allow them to get into numbers at all. And his reasoning is based on the Collins case. And I don't know if those of you from California, I'm sure, have read about the Collins case, but it's a situation where someone says, assume certain probabilities, then multiplies them together. And somebody gets convicted and it gets thrown out for good reason. But this is not like the Collins case. What Doug did in this count is basically do a counting method to estimate the number of cars that would have a particular. He's not multiplying numbers together. He's not making assumptions about the population. He's actually got probably much better data than FBI data. So anyway, these are some things, and maybe Woody can address this, but I guess 352 is the argument that it's more prejudicial than probative, and so it was thrown out, when in fact, it was extremely good data that Doug put together.